The value of a picture. The star chart is a picture. How many times have you seen this happen? A person goes into a room to have a difficult conversation, maybe with an underperformer, and they leave the room thinking that that person got the message. They understand that they either need to change or they're not going to be working here anymore. And the person that they talk to leaves that same meeting, leaves the same room thinking, yeah, there's a couple of things I should work on, but basically I'm amazing. Words, words, words. Words get lost. People interpret and misinterpret words. But when people see a picture, they understand what you really mean. When you say, hey, you're in the A box, you're really valued here, or you're in that B box, you could be more productive, or you're in the fire box, or you're in the productive but difficult box, suddenly they see what you mean because they have a picture. I once came to a client in the morning and met with the CEO, and the CEO said, reluctantly, I feel terrible about this, but I think I have to let our IT guy go. And I said, tell me, why do you have to do that? And so he elaborated all of the complaints that he had about his IT guy. He was very unhappy with him for a number of reasons. So I said to the CEO, as I always say, have you ever said exactly what you're saying to me to that person? Told him kindly but honestly exactly what complaints you have, and that if he can't fix this, this is a job-threatening situation. Have you said that? And he said, oh yes, I've said it all. But nobody likes to fire anyone. And he said, could you sit with them and maybe you can do something with them? Maybe just take a few minutes and maybe you can talk with them. So I agreed. So we sat down and I explained the star chart to him. He knew the star chart. And I asked him to place himself on the star chart. Where would he plot himself? Was he a star? Did he have star potential? Was he in the fire box? Was he a productive but difficult? He looked at it and he took the pen and he said, well, I'm for sure in the star box, but maybe I'm at the very top of the star box, so much so that I'm almost outside the star box. Maybe I'm the best person in the company. So I said to him, you know what? Why don't you sit down and take a breath, because I have some news for you. First of all, I'm here to help you win. That's the only reason we're having this discussion, so that you can be better and I can help you win. And I said, would it surprise you to know that the owners of the business would put you in the firebox and they're on the verge of letting you go? Well, he almost fell backwards out of his chair. He couldn't believe it. And I said to him, tell me, if you think about it a little bit, what complaints might they have about you? They said that, they've spoken with you about these things before. And he said, with a smile, he said, well, I don't suffer fools gladly. And I said, now that almost sounds like you consider that a strength. What do you mean by that? And he said, well, these people, they make me crazy. They ask all these goofy little questions about their computers and they should know these things, and it irritates me. So I explained to him that, you are an IT guy, you're a full-time guy. If they didn't have those concerns and complaints, you wouldn't have a job, you get that? And he laughed a little bit and said, well, I guess that's true. So then I said, tell me, do you want to be in the Starbucks, or maybe this isn't the place for you? Maybe it's not the role for you. If it's not, I'll help facilitate a nice exit. We'll get you a check, we'll save your dignity and all that. And he said, no, definitely I want to stay. I want to make this work. So I said, how can you repair some relationships? What do you think you could do that would put you into that Starbucks? And he said, okay, I've got an idea. He said, I'm a baker. I like baking at home. What if I made cookies? And what if I went to a company huddle, one each day, because huddles went throughout the company on a daily basis, and just apologize to each huddle and just tell them that I've got a renewed commitment to serving them well. Do you think that would be a start? And I said, yeah, do that. So that's what he did. He ended up working there for another 3 years. He found something that grabbed his interest more, and he ended up leaving. But that is the value of the star chart. Words, words, words get lost. And most of us have an ego-based reluctance to hear negative things about ourselves. So you tell a person that this is job threatening and they leave with the impression that, yeah, there's a few things I could work on, but basically I'm amazing. But when you show them on a picture, hey, you're actually in the firebox, suddenly they get it. Now it's time to triangulate your scores and plot them on the star chart. So it's really easy. All you do is you take the score from the vertical line and the score from the horizontal line, and you just bring them together. So in this example, this person has scored about a 7 in core values. They've scored under a 7 in productivity. So you mark on each axis the number that they scored at, and then you just make an X at the point where the two lines cross. So you draw a line from core values at the 7, you draw a line from productivity where that's a 6, and that just marks which box this team member currently resides in on the star chart. If you want to read more about that, just look in the Power of People Skills on page 83 and it elaborates more on that concept. But it's a very simple concept. We just want to plot them in a box. Let's begin with that top right box, the A box or the star box. These are people that our goal with them is we want to retain them. We want to provide them with challenge so they don't get bored. We want to show them love in a whole variety of ways, and I'll get into that in a bit. And we want to provide runway. We don't want them to be bored. We don't want them to have a reason to leave. We want to retain these folks. They're good people. They're the backbone of our organization. Now for the top left box in the star chart. This is a box of people that we want to develop. This is the B box, or what I call the star potential box. And these are people that have pretty good values. They've got good attitudes. We like them. They're not an active problem in the business, but we just wish that they'd be more productive. We wish they'd move faster, get more work done, get more accomplished. And the recipe for these people is always some combination of training, coaching, defining the role and getting more clear on the role, or redefining the role. Maybe they're just doing something they're not good at. Or having a reality talk to let them know they're actually in the develop box. They're in the B box. They're not in the star box. For these people who land in that B box, that develop box, and they need to do more, I run into this a lot, and owners and business leaders vent to me often about these people saying, they're good people, but how can I get them to be more productive? And many times they'll outline the faults that these people have. And I always ask the same question. I always ask, have you told them kindly and honestly how you feel? Have you ever said to them exactly what you're saying to me, but in kind terms so that they know what you expect? And the answer is almost always no. One time I talked to a guy and he said, I've had a lady and she's been in that B box for almost 8 years. And I said to him, as I always say, have you ever told her kindly and honestly what you're telling me right now? And he said, well, no, but I don't have to because she knows. And I said, well, how does she know? And he said, well, in the morning we make our coffee at the same coffee machine. And I just glare at her. And I thought, well, maybe your covert job performance evaluation is not quite connecting in the way that you think it is. You need to tell people where they're at so they have every chance to improve. Next, let's look at that bottom left box. These are people who have low core values. They're not a match really for you there. They're not productive in their role. This is not a good box to be in. Obviously, this is the fire box. These are C players. I think of them as wrong fits. And the recipe here is they need to move on if they cannot get out of that box. It's always the same recipe. It's a reality talk. They need to know that they're in that box and that their behavior is definitely job threatening if they can't get out of there quickly. And then you need to build a bench. If that person is gone, are you going to be stuck? Well, start to build your bench for who might fit in that role if and when that person leaves. Now, I think it's really important that anyone who's not in the star box gets a fair chance to change. So just yesterday, I was talking with a client and he has a person who is in this firebox and he said, I need to let this person go. So I asked him the question, would it be a surprise to that person to know that they're in that firebox? And he thought about it and he said, yeah, probably it would be a surprise they don't know. Well, my belief is then it's really not fair because they haven't had every chance to get out of that box and to succeed. So my thought is first you need to have a reality talk before you just walk in and fire that person, unless the offense is outrageous and egregious and cannot be tolerated. Of course, those are exceptional circumstances, but in general, they need to have that reality talk. People who fall in that firebox, it doesn't take a lot of deliberation to figure out what to do there. It's a sad story, not a hard story. It's not like you have to deliberate and really wonder what needs to be done. They're clearly not a fit for your organization. And just because they don't fit with you doesn't mean they won't fit somewhere well. So when you know, you need to take action. When you've had your reality talk, that person is unwilling or unable to change, you need to move them on to a better future for your company and for them too. Now for the toughest box, and this is the box where you need to confront people about their behavior. These are people on that bottom right-hand side of the chart who are very productive and who have very low values or very poor attitudes. They're toxic to people around them. They're difficult. I call them productive but difficult. I call them that because publishers won't let you call them what people actually refer to them as, which is not very nice language because nobody really likes these people often. They're really tough people to have around. The recipe here is you want to confront these people. You want to coach them. You want to give them a reality talk about intent versus impact. Like maybe they don't understand the impact they have on others around them. You may need to quarantine them if their skills are so hard to replicate that you can't find anybody else immediately. You may need to limit their contact with other people. You need to build your bench so that you can replace them one day when the time is right. And eventually, if they can't get out of that box, you're going to need to fire that person. Anyone who falls in those bottom two boxes are a major problem. If you're in the top two boxes, of course, I want to retain you if you're a star. If you're a develop person, hey, your values are there. Maybe we can teach you a skill or refine your job so that you can get better. But if you're in that fire box or the productive but difficult box, something needs to change there because you're really dragging down the whole organization. These are the toughest people to deal with because you think to yourself, I can't live without them. What would I do without that person in that role? Or can you? Because I actually find the opposite is true. So again, just this week, I sat with the CEO and he told me a situation where he had had a productive but difficult in a fairly key seat in a really specialized role. And this guy just had so much tribal knowledge. He thought many times of losing the guy, but he just felt like he couldn't live without his knowledge. Well, he was hard on everybody in the team. And one day he found a new job and he quit and left. So I talked to him about 3 months after this guy had quit. And he said, I should have known. I know the star chart. I should have let this guy go earlier. I'm kicking myself for it because now sales are way up since he's left. The rest of the team rallied around. They were so happy to see this guy gone and not have to live with his difficult attitudes that everything has improved. You can live without your productive but difficult. I'm just telling you, you can do it and you need to do it. These people are undermining you and undermining your culture. Let me remind you of some tips for effective chart plotting. Most people plot team members better than they really are. You give them a pass the first time around. So just bear this in mind as you score each one. Are you being completely honest with yourself about that person's attitude and performance? You may be tempted to plot them precisely on the line. If so, move them into the lower or the weaker box, because often this is just a subconscious way for you to avoid having to deal with them. So just don't leave them on the line. Make a choice one way or the other. And remember that you're only plotting them on how they're doing in their current job, not on what their potential could be in the future. So let me give you an example. Let's say you took a person who was in an entry-level role, let's say at a Walmart, and they're a greeter, and their job is to wash or wipe the rain off the carts as they come back from the parking lot and to greet each person with a smile. Well, if they do that, they wipe the rain off the carts, they greet each person with a smile, they're in the star box. They're a star player. So it's not about their potential. We don't care if they could be the manager of the store. We just say, are they doing well in the role we've asked them to do? Now, imagine you elevated that person into a cashier role, but the person didn't have numeracy skills and they couldn't count out change properly. That person might slip into being a B player because they have potential, but they're just not really very productive. And maybe they'd slip into the firebox because their attitude starts to slip and they realize that people are upset with them and that person needs to be let go. That's why you want to get the role to fit that person's skills. But in that role of wiping down the carts, smiling at people, they're an A player. So just don't think about, are they promotable or what kind of potential do they have? Restrict yourself to, how are they doing in the role that I'm currently asking them to fill? Now, if you haven't done so already, download your blank copy of the star chart and plot each of your key team members, evaluating each one on how well they live out your company's core values and how productive they are in their current role. Plot each of your people on the chart. Let's see where they all shake down and where they fit on that chart. Let's recap. In this module, you learned what each box on the star chart means. You learned some tips for effective star chart plotting, and you learned how to plot each member of your team on the star chart.